Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to say call hello, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, Ba'ashem, Rakar, Quadash. Send double honors to the apostles, elders, bishops of Great Millstone. Send much peace, love, salutations to Yakim out there pushing the word of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushua, in sincerity and truth. And this is Brother Ariala on a World War III Algo update. And as you brothers have been seeing, multiple brothers have been covering the news daily and going over things prophetically. Donald Trump, is moving in a very stout manner, like it talks about in the book of Daniel. He's being bold with a lot of the moves that he's making, and he's crossing lines. And we always talk about Revelation the 17th chapter, how the 10 horns were going to hate the whore, and we're starting to see that process as the United States begins to isolate themselves within their Western alliances. They are making it known that they are the whore that rideth upon the beast, and we are the global hegemon. And everybody needs to get in line, including my so-called allies. So after the statements that Trump and the United States have made about Greenland, Europe has basically said, no, you're not going to do that, Trump. And in response of these nations, having solidarity with Greenland, Trump has placed tariffs on these different European nations. So you got France, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, and the UK standing with Greenland saying, no U.S. invasion. You're not going to just come claim these lands and these waters. All right. So now there's a rift between Nato and these 10 horns and the whore that rideth upon the beast. And we always talk about this, Revelation the 17th chapter, how in the last days these alliances were going to culminate into war, right? In Revelation 17 and 15 it says, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest where the whore sitteth are peoples and multitude and nations and tongues, right? And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. These 10 horns represent those NATO nations, the EU, that whole block. And as you see here, we have these nations listed out in solidarity against the United States. This is prophetic. This is prophetic, right? It says, for the Most High have put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of the Most High shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Right? And so we always talk about how that whore, that great city, that Babylon, that mystery Babylon, represents America. Okay? That's that great city, man. All right? And so we seeing tensions brew more and more and more. I'm going to play this right here. This was from yesterday. It says, EU holds emergency meeting over Trump's Greenland tariffs.
The European Union is holding an emergency meeting today after President Trump threatened on Saturday to impose a new 10% tariff on Denmark and 7 other European nations until a deal is reached for the U.S. to purchase Greenland. The EU saying in a statement the president's move could undermine transatlantic relations. Meanwhile, on Thursday, in an extraordinary step, troops from NATO countries across Europe, American allies all, began to arrive in Greenland in a show of solidarity with Denmark, which controls that massive icy island. So why is President Trump fixated on Greenland? And how far is he willing to go to take it? Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles traveled to Copenhagen this week with a bipartisan group of American lawmakers. Our Sunday focus this morning is part of the NBC News series, Finding Common Ground.
Greenland, a quiet but huge island filled with ice, has never been the center of international intrigue.
All our lives, and every time we travel in the world, we had to show Google Maps where Greenland was. So now we're everywhere.
Things have changed.
We need Greenland for national security very badly. If we don't have it, we have a big hole in national security.
President Trump has
And all this nonsense that he's talking about national security, they don't need Greenland for no damn national security. All right? All the missiles and weaponry that the United States has, is more than enough. They don't need Greenland. It's just a power play, and everybody knows it. You know what I'm saying? The thing about it is right now that Trump is really saying, what are you going to do about it? And this is creating ire between Trump and not just the so-called enemies of the East, as far as China, as far as Russia, as far as Iran, so on and so forth. But it's creating ire between their own allies, like it talks about in the book of Obadiah. You know, you read Obadiah chapter 1, you know, and we always say this: Esau has a legacy of fighting against himself. You know, since the time that Amalek came up. Right, all the way through the time of the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, right, the time of the Renaissance period, the time of the American Revolution, and the expanse of the West in the Americas, where you had Britain versus Spanish, the Spanish versus the French versus everybody else, World War I, World War II. These are all Edomites fighting each other, and we're not going to see that stop until the complete destruction of the Edomite nation in the War of Armageddon. Okay, Obadiah 1 and 1 really. It says, "Thus saith the Lord, power concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised." Right? So now you got these nations, you know, building themselves up against Edom. You know, the Arab nations, the Asian nations. All right. And even different Edomite nations. And America in particular is greatly despised. "The pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the cleft of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord." So America has put itself up, even now over in Iran that they've taken down the internet. You got Elon Musk with his was it Starlink, you know, giving internet capabilities. They're shooting rockets into the atmosphere. Their air force is known as the most prolific in military history. They really think that they sit as the eagle and powerful on that high horse. Okay, but they're going to be brought down, right? "If these came to thee, if robbers by night, how art thou cut off? Would they not have stolen until they had enough? Even the grape gatherers, if the grape gatherers came to thee, would they not leave some grapes? How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up?" All right, so there's not going to be anything left for Esau and Edom. "All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him." Right? So as these things continue, you're going to see backdoor deals being made, nation between nation, the Most High putting evil thoughts in the minds of the leaders of these different nations. And it's going to culminate into a battle, into a war, into a fight. Right now, it's just diplomacy, policy, and talking online. But as we said, it's a progression of prophecy. In Revelation 17, this right here that we're reading in Obadiah, all of these things are ramping up. Okay?
Made it his mission to take possession of Greenland, even though the Kingdom of Denmark and the people of the island have made it clear it's not on the market.
Greenland is not for sale.
And what are you going to do, Denmark? What the fuck are you going to do? What are you going to do? Nothing.
So what is on the table from the U.S. side right now is not interesting for us, and you can't buy a country.
Greenland is a sparsely populated island, the least densely populated territory on the planet. But as the globe warms, the ice on the island and in the water around it is starting to melt, revealing new shipping lanes and the potential for resources like rare earth minerals. Most importantly, Greenland's location between North America and the Arctic means it's crucial as an early warning system in the event of a Russian missile attack. But the U.S. military already operates a base on Greenland's northwest tip. The president's position is baffling for the people of Greenland and the broader Kingdom of Denmark.
The door in Greenland is wide open for it.
Yeah, so it's just basically wanting to acquire resources. And We kind of, like I said, this scripture, Habakkuk, the second chapter, is going to come out multiple times every single week because we're watching this scripture jump off the page. They can never have enough, and it's gonna cause these other nations to be upset, to be mad, to be like, man, we're tired of you, bro. You know, that is just not gonna stop. Okay. Habakkuk 2, verse 5, it says, yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increases that which is not his? How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay? Shall they not rise up suddenly, that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be booties unto them? Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, of the city, and of all that dwell therein. See, this is going to just continue with happening, and more shame is going to be spewed upon America. People are tired of it. Okay.
Make up for it. All right, The European Union is reportedly threatening to retaliate against the president's bid for Greenland, considering a, quote, trade bazooka on the U.S.
This as President Trump threatens new tariffs on NATO countries if no deal is made. Maddie Rivera is live in West Palm Beach with the latest. Hey, Maddie.
Hi, good morning, guys. Well, this trade bazooka that the EU is reportedly considering using against the U.S. has never been used before. It's considered the nuclear option, and it was designed to protect the EU from foreign pressure. Obviously, the hope is that dialogue will prevail, and the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, he spoke with the president yesterday, and he says, in part, we will continue working on this, and I look forward to seeing him in Davos later this week. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer spoke with the president as well, and he says this.
Any decision about the future status of Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. The use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong, nor is it helpful to frame efforts to strengthen Greenland's security as a justification for economic pressure.
The president, though, still appears unmoved. The president saying on Truth Social, we have subsidized Denmark and all of the countries of the European Union for many years by not charging them tariffs. It is time for Denmark to give back. World peace is at stake. China and Russia want Greenland, and there is nothing that Denmark can do about it. The tariffs on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, Netherlands, and Finland are set to kick in on February 1st. They begin at 10%, but will increase to 25% in June until a deal for the U.S. to buy Greenland is reached. And like Rutte said,
and this is what's happened when you go back and you read Revelation, the 17th chapter, that they gave their power to the beast, you know, and they agreed. So they're underneath the whims of the United States, and the United States, as far as the world reserve currency with the dollar, and the surpluses, the trade deficits that the United States have with most of these nations. You know, the United States can afford to put tariffs on these nations and strain them out economically to force them into deals. Right? Revelation 17:12 says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So now they're relegated to the whore that rideth upon the beast, that controls everything. You see, they have to be complicit to the whims of Emperor Nero Trump. Okay.
the president will be heading to the World Economic Forum in Davos later on this week. He's expected to make a speech on Wednesday, where leaders are going to be using this as an opportunity to hopefully...
And everybody's going to be tuned in on this on Wednesday. when Trump pulls up on Davos, right? Which is where they have the World Economic Forum meeting every January. And they do all types of wicked sacrifices and all types of stuff. But along with that, this is where a lot of the elites give the heads of states and the heads of these corporations their marching orders behind closed doors, like it talks about in Psalm 64, the secret counsel of the wicked. All right?
De-escalate the situation. With Ainsley and
there ain't
no
no de-escalation. These people keep talking about peace and de-escalation. No. We're not in that time. We're not in that time. We're in the time of things continuously being kicked up, right? Confusion.
Maddie, and just a side note, Marco Rubio, his son, is at Florida. Not
Miami.
Yeah, not Miami, but he's running back there. Maybe they'll win the national championship soon. So in Greenland, CBS did a poll, only 14% of the country are in support of taking Greenland by force. Only 30% approve of buying it. So I think the president's got to make his case to the American people for this. But in terms of rare earth, in terms of location, in terms of building military bases, pathway to the Arctic, nobody disputes the value here. My hope is there's a deal. Between Denmark not being able to get rare earth itself, between the people of Greenland, 86,000 who mostly fish, they need us to do it. So couldn't we work out a deal where we take control of the rare earth, we give the people of Greenland their third, and we take half, then we expand our military bases there because Denmark cannot do it, or else they would have done it already. And we have a right, evidently, in a treaty we signed in 1951 to expand our military presence there. And maybe we could...
And listening to Esau justify themselves as far as their global conquest is absolutely disgusting. These Edomites will bend over backwards to justify their demonic, diabolical nature. We read in Habakkuk the 2nd chapter, man. They can never have enough. When you read up, and it says the soul which is lifted up is not upright in him. These guys will. I was listening to Glenn Beck, and I almost started throwing up, just listening to him trying to figure out a way to make Trump as some type of world hero. All of these people are demons. And that's why the Most High's got them in a trick bag, because of their pride. And they're going to literally lead themselves into destruction because of pride and arrogance. Thinking that they can just trumper all the way around the world, no pun intended, and take what they want, We're going to see how that ends up. The scriptures say over and over again, basically expresses how it's not going to end well for this place. Okay, I'm gonna play a little bit of this with Myron Gaines. He's been all over this, going in. He's got some good content. If you go to his page, he's got this clip page. If you bros don't know about Myron Gaines X, and I think he has Myron Gaines X clips. I'm not sure, but this was a good clip. I'm gonna play a little bit of it because it brings everything home. And over the course of this week with the WEF, there's going to be a lot of information coming out and a lot of news coming out. We're going to see a lot of propaganda talking about Iran and them striking Iran. And because we told you after they took Venezuela and pretty much got that settled that Iran was next. And because they want Iran out the way, because they're trying to block off energy from China. And then they'll start to probably try to do the whole Gaza Strip, building up the Gaza Strip. Okay. And taking the Golan Heights. And yeah, so systematically they will be doing that, and that'll all be leading into the MOTB, all leading into the mark of the beast systems. So all this is all a progression of prophecy, and we're watching it happen.
I am a non-interventionist. I am not a fan of intervening in foreign affairs, and I am not a fan of, quite frankly, what we're running right now, which is gunboat diplomacy. Okay, with what we did in Venezuela, and the reason why is because what you guys need to understand, right? And this is going to be a very ugly truth, but Americans need to understand this, okay? We are no longer in a unipolar world, okay? Back after World War II, the United States emerged as the world power, okay? As the only world power, really, right? Winston Churchill gave a famous speech where he declared the United States as the pinnacle of world power, right? This is after our show of force in World War II with the use of the atomic bomb, which no one really had access to back then, but our adversaries, China, Russia, etc., quickly caught up and also were able to get nuclear weapons. And the military edge that we once had, quickly started to dissipate over time. Now, without going into a bunch of history and everything else like that and putting you guys to sleep, let's go ahead and fast forward to where we are now. If you think that the invasion of Venezuela was for liberation of Venezuelan people or to combat and arrest a violent dictator / drug trafficker, well, you're an idiot. The real reason we invaded, which I think even the Trump administration admitted, was for the oil. But it's not just for the oil. You guys need to understand why it was for the oil. Okay? So let's go through this. The number one thing you guys need to understand is that the United States, our power is built on 4 primary pillars. These pillars are reserve currency status, the petrodollar, SWIFT, and our military might. These 4 elements, okay, are the reason why we have the ridiculous amount of leverage and power that we have in today's world. Okay? Go through that again. Reserve currency status, the petrodollar, SWIFT, and our military. Now, all 4...
Yeah, now all of the, he's right on that. That's what keeps the American hegemon at the top. And that's why Trump is so stout, because he's really like, what you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Okay?
These things are being challenged right now. Okay? Let's go first with the petrodollar. Last year in 2024, in June, Saudi Arabia decided to not renew its agreement to do all of its oil transactions in the US dollar. Okay? And basically, this hurts the power of the dollar, because we struck a deal back in the 1970s under the Nixon administration where the Saudis would be protected by us in exchange for them doing all of their oil transactions in US dollars. Why is this important?
When everybody has to buy oil or energy in dollars, then everybody has to hold dollars. That means the demand for the dollar goes through the roof because everybody in the world has to hold dollars so they can get oil. That means you can artificially crank up the supply. This is that thick clay that you read about here in Habakkuk, the 6th chapter. We did a World War III algorithm, the petrodollar, and we covered this and talked about how is the whole world laden in thick clay, and how is America itself laden with thick clay. But because of the petrodollar, and it's created this unreasonable exponential demand for dollars in the world, well, then we can just print dollars. The supply of the dollars doesn't matter because the demand for it is basically infinite. And that's the situation that they've been able to create. Okay?
The reason why this is important is because it forces other countries to do their oil transactions in US dollars. Everybody needs oil. And since everybody needs oil, everyone needs to hold US dollars. Since everyone needs to use US dollars, this puts us in a position where US dollars are always in demand. If US dollars are always in demand, that means that we are able to run deficit trading. We are able to do certain things that other countries aren't able to do. How do you guys think that we have almost 40 trillion in debt, yet we're now suffering economically? Have you guys ever thought about that for a second? How is it that we're able to do that? The reason why we're able to do that is because of the petrodollar and reserve currency status. This is what's called the Triffin dilemma, where if you are going to be the world's reserve currency like we currently are, you are always going to run into debt. Okay? So to be honest with you guys, this whole national debt, $40 trillion in debt, blah, 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 it's kind of unavoidable. Okay? And we've let it exceed quite a bit because of all the foreign wars in the Middle East. That's a whole other conversation. What you guys need to know for the purposes of this conversation is the US dollar is no longer backed by gold. Since the US dollar is no longer backed by gold, it was backed by the petrodollar. One of the reasons why it was backed. And the Saudis had agreed to do all their oil transactions in US dollars. This is important because it props up the US dollar. And it forces everyone to use the US dollar. Now, you guys are probably wondering, well, Myron, so you're telling me that we agreed to protect the Saudis in exchange for them? Well, explain this. What you guys need to understand about the Middle East is, in the Middle East, the biggest fear for any king, sultan, dictator, autocrat, whatever it is, their biggest fear is being overthrown. Okay?
And we always read that where it talks about Ishmael, how he was going to war against his brothers. In the book of Genesis, it talks about that prophetically. And he's going to war against everybody. And so they always have skirmishes over in the Arab countries and the Arab nations because that's the prophecy concerning Ishmael. All right?
That's their biggest fear. As you guys can tell, Arab niggas, let's be honest, they're hard-headed. And I can tell you guys this as a fellow Arab. Okay? Niggas are hard-headed. They don't want to listen to nothing. So the biggest fear in any Muslim Arab majority country a lot of the times tends to be being overthrown. This is why Arab militaries always lose conflicts. I'll tell you why. Because they prioritize loyalty over competence. So let's say Muhammad is the dictator or the king. He will put his buddy Ahmed as the head of the treasury. Well, the problem is that Ahmed never went to school. He could barely add. Okay? Then he makes his other buddy, Amir, all right, the head of the military. Well, he doesn't even know how to shoot a gun. Well, he's loyal. So what ends up happening is they favor loyalty over competence. This is why so many Arab militaries are weak and they lose all the time. You know, they're not competent. It is what it is. Niggas always take.
And so, you know, we read about that in the book of Joel 3, how these Arab nations that are these sand niggas, as he says, even though they're constantly in skirmishes, they're not known for having strong militaries because their cohesiveness is not there, because they're always just betraying one another, this, that, and this. Well, in these last days, these heathen are going to build themselves up. In Joel 3 and 12, it says, let the heathen be awakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Right? You know what? Start up at 10. I'm sorry. At 9, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I am strong. And because of the moves that America has been making, the West has been making, the counter moves has been to, you know, basically armor up these Ishmaelites, armor up these Arab nations. All right, to put them in a position to be able to fight back. So you're going to start to see, you know, you have Iran right now that's being tested, but you're going to start to see Turkey, you know, and these other nations rise up. Okay, you're going to start to see that, man. Even some of these African nations, right? Going back, let's play a little bit more of this.
Take L's. It is what it is, right? So the Saudi Arabian government and the royal family is terrified of an uprising, being overthrown, etc. So the U.S. came in and said, look, we will guarantee your security. You will always be in power. Don't worry. But you just have to do oil transactions in dollars. Cool. And this is an agreement that lasted for decades, 50 years plus. One of the crazy things that Nixon was able to pull off. So that explains the petrodollar. Reserve currency status. Since the United States has a very strong military, we have rule of law, right? We have a democratic government. You know, things are just done a certain way, right? We have reserve currency status. This means when people do transactions all across the world, whether it's for commodities, global trade, etc., they use the US dollar. The US dollar is kind of the default instrument used to purchase commodities when it comes to international trade outside of the petrodollar. So the petrodollar is a component to reserve currency status, and obviously reserve currency status from commodities. This keeps dollars always in need, okay? Now, the majority of transactions used to be done by the US dollar, but now the US dollar accounts for something like 50 to 60% of global trade. Why? Because BRICS is rising up.
All right, so a couple of years ago, the United States was around 70, above 75% that the US dollar was used in basically buying goods and services around the earth. That has dropped over the course of the last 10, 15 years. Well, really over the course of the last 10 years. Down to, I think it's in the low 60s. You know, because you got China and Russia doing a lot of deals outside of the U.S. dollars. So they're holding less U.S. Treasury bonds. So Trump is coming in and looking at the balance, looking at the sheet and going, this is a problem. We need to make sure that we tight on the back end. That's why he's being so aggressive. That Revelation 12, you know, the devil has come down on you quickly because he know if he have but a short time. So things are starting to ramp up. So Myron goes and talks about the SWIFT system, basically the banking system that the West uses that's out of New York, that you know these nations use to basically settle deals. nations are starting to move outside that SWIFT system. So that's red alert. It's red alert. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
Shut down your banks. We can sanction you. We can f up your ability to earn revenue, right? To sell your commodities, to do transactions, right? That is SWIFT. To make it simple. There's way more complex than that, but for the purposes of this discussion, so I can explain this in a very simple way, that is what SWIFT is. Okay? Then obviously military might. You guys already know, we have the biggest military in the world, pretty much. We have an extremely advanced military. We have nuclear weapons. We have submarines. We have a competent air force. We have air superiority. We have all types. And we have military bases all over the world, right? So these are the four things, chat, that has made the United States the world power that it is. And it's allowed us to maintain world power dominance for a very long time. Again, the petrodollar, reserve currency status, SWIFT, and our military. Now, like I said before, these four things are being challenged. Let's go back through it.
Okay. And also control over the narrative, media. That's a big one. Media is a big one. You know, the control over the lens and view of history and what people see is a big one. It's mind control.
Okay. The petrodollar. Saudi Arabia no longer doing all their transactions in dollars. This came out last year, but it got buried in a news cycle. Why? Because it was an election year. No one talked about it. I was one of the few people that posted on Twitter saying, yo, this isn't good. Fast forward 2 years, and we're invading Venezuela. I knew this was going to come. I knew we were going to take some type of drastic situation to combat the fact that the petrodollar isn't as strong. Next, reserve currency status. Constantly being challenged. BRICS is rising up. Less countries are using the US dollar for their transactions. They're using the yuan. They're using the ruble. Countries are trading in oil outside of the US dollar. SWIFT. Many countries are getting off of SWIFT. There are starting to become more attractive alternatives that the Chinese and the Russians are manufacturing. The Russians can't use SWIFT anymore. They got kicked out when they invaded Ukraine. And I'll tell you guys this. 2022 was the beginning to show that there can be an alternative system. When Russia bought a bunch of gold, right, and was prepared for the sanctions and getting kicked off of SWIFT, the day they invaded Ukraine, guess who was in Russia? Hemeti, the head of the RSF, Rapid Support Forces from Sudan. He was there with a bunch of gold because the Russians knew that they were going to get kicked off SWIFT, and they knew that they were going to have to operate outside of the US dollar paradigm, right? They knew they were going to get kicked off SWIFT. They knew that they were going to need to start doing transactions in ruble. They knew that they were going to have to start selling their oil in ruble, all this other shit. And they've been fine. Despite the fact that they've been sanctioned to hell, they've been surviving. This sets a precedent, chat, that you don't need to exist in the U.S. financial infrastructure to be successful. And that was a threat to Washington. And not only that, not only did Russia invade Ukraine, and they're still invading Ukraine, and they're still fighting and shit like that, the U.S. has had to basically bend the knee and say, we're going to go ahead and exercise diplomacy with these guys, despite the fact that Putin has a warrant for his arrest. Despite the fact that the entire international community condemns him, despite the fact that NATO hates him. Why? Because the sanctions and getting kicked off of SWIFT did not create as much damage as they thought. And this is what's created the need and the rise for BRICS, an alternative system. Okay? So we talked about obviously the petrodollar being challenged because Saudi Arabia no longer does all their transactions in US dollars. We talked about the reserve currency status going down. Less countries are using US dollars to trade commodities internationally. Okay? More banks are buying more gold. Why do you guys think gold has been going up in price? If you guys notice that, gold has been spiking. Gold has been spiking because Trump has been issuing these tariffs. Foreign policy has been a little bit shaky, having issues with all these countries. So they're like, we don't know if we can rely on the US dollar system as much. Let's go ahead and hedge our bets. Let's go ahead and start buying some gold. BRICS has been rising. Russia's shown that you don't need to deal in dollars to be able to still make your economy thrive. Russia had the 5th strongest economy for a period of time, despite being sanctioned to hell. So they proved that you do not have to exist within the U.S. financial monster to survive, right? You can be sanctioned to hell and still operate and still have a thriving economy, which Russia.
So this is what's got Trump moving frantically on paper. Now we all know this is going to lead into the MOTB systems, but these set precedences within this kingdom to move the way that they are moving. Okay. And it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. All right? It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. All right? This is Isaiah chapter 47, verse 10. It says, For thou hast trusted in thy wickedness, thou hast said, None seeth me. Thy wisdom and thy knowledge, it hath perverted thee. And thou hast said in thine heart, I am and none else beside me. Right? Therefore shall evil come upon thee, thou shalt not know from whence it riseth, and mischief shall fall upon thee, and thou shalt not be able to put it off. And desolation shall come upon thee suddenly, which thou shalt not know. Okay? So this is America is gonna be hit with a downward spiral that's gonna be off the charts. And it's gonna affect the whole world. It's gonna affect the whole world, man. Right now, Trump is presenting himself like, oh, we fixing this, we fixing that. Like we always read in Jeremiah 51. You know, they would have healed Babylon, but she will not be healed. No, man, what we're seeing is the beginning spiraling of the complete collapse of what we understand as the Western Edomite Empire. And they're gonna shoot for this MOTB, but it's just gonna lead to an all-out war. And these nations are already starting to show their fangs against America. All right, you know, Denmark and you know, they've always had alliances with them in Finland with Germany, and Germany has always had a tight alliance with France. But in Germany and France have always not liked America since World War II. So they're getting the raw end of the stick when it comes to political and economic moves that have been made around the world. So we're just going to have to see and watch, because this is going to continue to ramp up, man. I just wanted to touch in on that, man, and kind of, you know, highlight some things. There should be a lot more information that comes out this week. So we'll keep our eyes on that and prophesy accordingly. With that being said, I'm going to say, call hello Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Rakah Kodash. Double honors once again to the apostles, elders, and bishops of Great Millstone. Much peace, love, salutations to y'all. I'm out there pushing the word of Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, sincerely and true. Shalom.